Hello and welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
We've got a few minutes until go time. So in that time, if you want to maybe open up a browser window and log in to the OER project, we'll be sending out some links to the specific assets on the site throughout the series. So it might be helpful to be logged in already.
Thanks for the warning.
Is anybody else's school gearing up for homecoming season?
No.
Not yet. That seems to be the source of the most busyness here in northern Michigan these days.
It's homecoming week for us. Today was Sports Jersey Day.
Our freshmen are going on a big field trip during Spirit Week, so they're trying to plan a Spirit Day that wouldn't be too ludicrous as they're touring manufacturing facilities. We don't want, like wacky hair day or something as we send, 260 students out into the community to represent us. I saw that we had bikers versus surfers day. I'm not entirely sure what route to go with that. I'm supposed to dress like Sandy from Greece or what?
Interesting. There's still a little skater culture here in Utah, but I haven't seen a lot of biker.
Or I guess I could, ride my bicycle around school, but I doubt that's what's intended.
And Monday was a different one for us. It was Country Camo Day or Country Club.
Oh. It was something off the Outer Banks thing. We had Country Club versus Beecher or something like that last year. I can tell I'm aging when these pop culture references escape me. The year they want to do Visco Girl Day, at first I thought they're saying Disco Girl. I'm like, well, you guys are really vibing the retro stuff, but I could do Disco Girl. Like I could get my Farrah Fawcett hair going, but Visco, gonna have to take that one to the Urban Dictionary. All right, it is 6 o'clock and we have an action-packed agenda. We want to honor everybody's time this evening, so I think we'll go ahead and get rolling. First, welcome from the OER project. We are so thankful for you to take time out of your, I'm sure, busy back to school season to join us this evening. My name is Ann Kushmiter. I am teaching high school in northern Michigan. This is year 18 for me. For the last 4 years, I've been using OER project materials for my on-level sophomores, and I am entering my 3rd year of using the AP materials for my junior and senior world history elective. Joining me this evening is Rob Valenti. Rob, would you mind saying hello?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rob Valenti. I teach at Springville Griffith Institute, a small high school about 30 miles south of Buffalo, New York. This is year 17 for me. I've been using World History Project material since 2017. The 1750s course for my on-level sophomores and the Origins course for my at-risk freshmen. So welcome, everybody.
And Rob is going to be helping moderate the chat tonight. So if I miss a question or comment in the chat, he'll help call my attention to that. If you have any questions, feel free to ask those in the chat and Rob will help make sure that we get you an answer. He'll also be putting some important links throughout the evening in the chat. So let's start with a roadmap today. We'll begin with an icebreaker. We always love to get to know who is in our sessions so that we can customize and meet your needs to the best of our ability. We'll also give you an overview of the OER project's approach to reading and discuss a new formative tool that you can use to monitor student progress. We'll review some examples from real students. We'll also walk through the process of 3 close reads from the student point of view. We will brainstorm some interventions. I can only imagine how many cumulative years of experience we have with everyone attending this evening. So I'm excited to hear what you all have. And finally, give you some areas where you can find ongoing support as you continue to teach reading throughout the school year. To start off with, we would love to know who's here, what parts of the world are represented. It's always exciting to see where everyone's from. So if you would please take a moment to respond in the chat. Where do you live and teach? What brings you out to the session today? And in a short phrase, what do you notice when you look at something up close versus far away? Inspired by our tempting image there. Looks pretty tasty.
Well, I'm from Utah. I teach at Connection High, and I have I attended the conference this year and was really impressed. And so I wanted to keep doing it, and I want to see more ways to do the close reading, which is always kind of intimidating for my students.
Yeah, that is absolutely understandable. Well, I hope you get some good suggestions tonight. What course are you working with?
I'm using Origins, and then I still a lot from Big History.
Yeah, the flexibility of these courses is always so welcome.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and then something up close. Well, if it's up close, I'm usually eating it, so I pay attention to that. And then if it's far away, I usually get close enough to decide if it's something I want to buy and eat.
See some comments in the chat about context. That's great to see, certainly relevant to our 3 close reads protocol and the contextualization activities that pop up throughout the OER project courses. So we've got some folks working with intervention strategies. I'm really excited to see what they have to offer during our intervention portion. See, we have lots of West Coast folks too, so thanks for making it here today. I'm sure it's probably kind of a rush for you in your after school hours. I see Laura's got a reference to scale switching. You can tell she's an OER project pro. All right. Well, if you're just joining us, feel free to chime in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from, what you hope to get out of the session. And I think we'll go ahead and get started. So first, I'd like to introduce a little bit about the OER project's approach to close reading. First and foremost, literacy is a very strong component of the OER project. Now, I don't get a lot of my students saying, when are we ever going to use this? Because it's quite apparent that we're developing critical thinking and literacy skills that are going to transcend the boundaries of our classroom. At the OER project, there's a pretty broad definition of text. Certainly there are primary and secondary sources, as one would expect in a history curriculum. But in addition to that, there is a plethora of videos, of data collections, of mapping activities, graphic biographies. So in this case, the definition of text really runs the gamut, and having that variety, I think, is really beneficial for students. With the 3 close reads strategy, the ultimate goal is to move students from the basic decoding of text to a level of automaticity. As adults, I think sometimes we just take for granted how much we use our close reading skills on a daily basis. But as you're introducing this to students, you might encourage them to just pause and reflect on how much they're using reading throughout the day, whether it's signs, directions, recipes, a repair manual, anything like that. You can apply the close reading and have it help you throughout your day. So the goal is to have students practice these protocols enough that they can apply them in other school content areas and just in real life. So the 3 Close Reads protocol is founded in learning science, not necessarily pioneered by the OER project, but it certainly is a cornerstone of the OER project. So here it is, the tool of the hour. While the name is 3 Close Reads, and that might feel a little bit daunting to your students at first, I know at first thought, oh, but sometimes it's a win if I can get one close read, but the name is a little bit misleading. It's really going to be about 1 3/4 of a read for students because they're not reading the entire article 3 times through. When I introduce this to students, I take a little poll, okay, who plays a sport, who's in orchestra, who's in band, who plays video games, until I have some sort of skill that they can all have in mind. And I ask them, well, do you master every piece of sight reading on your first try? Do you perform every play perfectly on your first try? Do you pass every level on your first try? And of course they say no. So I explain, like anything else, reading requires a toolkit. It requires a variety of approaches, a variety of skills, and you're not going to be perfect your first time. We all have to sort of strengthen our muscles and practice and get better at this. So 3 Close Reads is a way to arm them with different strategies to deepen their understanding of the text. Fairly new, hot off the presses, is this checklist that you can use to monitor student progress with 3 Close Reads. It's really not intended to be a comprehensive grading rubric, although some rubrics are in process this year for some of the skills-based activities with the OER project. Rather, the checklist is intended to monitor student growth throughout the year because 3 Close Reads is probably something that you'll revisit and form a habit for students with. So the checklist is really meant to know areas where you can celebrate student success and student progress, and to identify areas that might need some extra intervention, perhaps some individual students who need some extra support as they progress. I was also thinking that if you need to collect data for maybe like an SLO here in Michigan, our evaluation system allows us to do an SLO to show student progress. So I was thinking this could maybe even be a tool for data collection. Sometimes in social studies, we're not totally confident in how to gather that data because we don't have, an iReady or a PSAT that targets our specific skill set. So I was thinking this might be a way that you could gather some data if your school needs that. Okay. So for those of you who have not encountered the 3 Close Reads protocol before, we thought we would give you an opportunity to experience that from the student point of view. Or even if you have given it a try, this will be a chance to experience what your students might feel when you do this in class. Again, this name of 3 Close Reads might make students think it's more intimidating than it really is. In each pass, your goal is different, so it doesn't feel repetitive at all. In the first read, students are just skimming for the gist. My personal preference is to use the 3 Close Reads strategy with an article that has a lot of powerful visuals. So political cartoons, graphs, that sort of thing. Sometimes my students enter class with the misconception that a reading that has a lot of pictures is great because you can skip over them and get done fast. So I like to dispel that myth from the beginning. And by calling attention to those visuals right from the get-go, it sets the tone that we should pay attention to these valuable assets. So in that first reading, they're just skimming. They're reading titles, they're reading subheadings, they're reading pictures and captions. From that, they'll make some predictions about what they think the full article will be about. The second read, I like to call our meat and potatoes read. This is where students are getting the bulk of their nuts and bolts, their key content. In the second read, they're going to identify key content vocabulary, and they're also going to look for the author's claim or claims and specific evidence that he or she is using to support those claims. Finally, in the third read, students are going to be looking for information that supports, extends, or challenges information that they already know. Those questions are more evaluative, and they're really going to push students to think at a higher level. So in order to give this a try, we're going to ask you to work through the 3 close reads process with this article, Economic and Material Causes of Revolt by Bennett Sherry. So first, let's take about 2 minutes to have you do a skim, look for that gist. And if you're willing to share some predictions, what you think the article might be about, you share in the chat. One little note here too is that the image on this screen indicates a 590 Lexile, but when you click into the article, it'll default to a 1200 level Lexile. However, that is adjustable. If you would like to customize that, there's a menu in the top left portion of your screen. I would say, I have a question in the chat. Should we read the 590 Lexile? I would say maybe go for the 1200 unless you just want to experiment with how students can customize that Lexile level. And whatever you feel like would be most appropriate for your population would be great. I see a great question in the chat. Can we give students links to particular Lexile levels? When you share a link to an OER project article, it will default to the highest Lexile level, and then students can, toggle with that menu. However, there is a bit of a workaround. You can download a certain Lexile as a PDF and then share the link to that PDF from your Google Drive, or if perhaps you're using LMS, Google Classroom, Schoology, Canvas, you could just upload that PDF if you really want to ensure that they access the Lexile level that you're asking them to. Right. I see Christy mentioning one thing that's clear, that's revolutions have multiple causes. Absolutely. If you have your students doing the causation activities that surround the revolutions units in the OER project, that is a very powerful point. Anybody else wants to share some predictions about the gist? Please feel free. Laura, I like your point about the world never going to be the same. Maybe we can even blend in some CCOT. Yes, Lisa, thank you for pointing out that the article is going to include revolutions from multiple continents. I always appreciate the truly global perspective of the OER project assets. Dallas, I like your point about how the complexity of evolutions may be more complex than we've traditionally learned. I know my first thought when I think about and put a little more emphasis on it after we read Bennett's article about these economic causes. Okay, hopefully that was enough time for first read. If I can ask you to move on to you would conventionally think of when you ask students to read an article, right? You're reading it from beginning to end. Students would be pulling out key vocab and looking for claims and evidence. Now, in the 3 Close Reads tool, it does ask students to identify vocabulary words that they don't know. Now, if your students are anything like mine, you always have a couple. You probably can even picture them in your head right now that are going to say, I already know all the words. So I actually have adopted a strategy from Rob that works beautifully in this situation. Rob, would you mind sharing that really quick? I think I might have put him on the spot. Rob suggested that if you have students who say, I already know all the vocab, then you can turn the tables on them to say, okay, so please identify the 3 to 4 most important vocabulary terms in this article, which has come in very useful. So thank you.
Yeah, and one of the way that I structure that question for students is, and again, sometimes I challenge my students, and I might quiz them on a few of the words that I feel are really important, but just the follow-up to the point that you made for me is, okay, so if you know all of the words, if somebody else were reading this article, what might be 2 to 3 words that would be critical for them to understand, to move beyond just the gist of the article, but actually be able to start pulling out some of the key claims and the evidence that supports it.
Love that. Thank you. Okay, so I think we'll take about 5 to 6 minutes to ask you to do that second read.
And I think we've got a great question from Janice. She's asking, are there any ideas that we can share in regard to how to handle a wide range, of reading speeds when doing something like this? I'll take the point on this. In the onset here, I told you that I teach at-risk freshmen. I actually introed this strategy last week with my students. And the first one out of the gate, I read it with them. I slowed my cadence. I identified key claims, kind of walking them through that process. And, to support what Ann said earlier, that it's really not 3 full reads. I treat it as a skim, a read, and a recap, just kind of teaching them, what these steps are in the process, and kind of taking the burden off of them as they learn how to use the tool and as they learn how to use the strategy. And then, as I progress through the course of the year, as we continue to do this, and I kind of pull off some of that scaffolding that I've put in allowing them that independent time. And I'm just kind of working through the room as they work through the various steps. That's one way that I handle it on the early days of class.
A couple more options could be that you might have students reading different Lexile levels simultaneously. So those who you know are going to speed through are maybe working at that 1200 Lexile level, versus those who might need a slower pace, maybe working at the that 590 or somewhere in the middle. Another great resource is the audio function on these articles, little megaphone icon in the top right. Sometimes I play that out loud and have my students follow along with the text of the reading in front of them. So that ensures a consistent cadence. And especially the first time, or maybe even few times that we do 3 close reads, we are going one step at a time, all together as a class, to really check for understanding frequently, which helps to reduce any discrepancies in timing. And if you really want to focus on keeping everybody at the same pace, I've used Pear Deck before, where the teacher is controlling the pace of the lesson and you're having students respond to the prompts in real time in your Pear Deck questions. So you are, again, checking for understanding every single little step of the way to make sure students are really comfortable and become proficient at this task. Thank you. That was a great question. Danielle, I think that's a great point too, that discrepancies in speed of an activity can be due to student interest or schema, in addition to their readiness. So that might be a time to chunk the article down even further. There is a fabulous feature that I was a little slow to discover, honestly, and I was sort of kicking myself because it took me a while. It's called Text Reader. At the top of a unit page in the OER project curricula, there's a button that says Text Reader that will take you to a Microsoft Word version of all of the articles at all of the levels. So if I'm working with a reading that I feel like it would really behoove my students to take it one chunk at a time, I'll use that text reader function to break up the text onto different slides. And maybe I'm having them do like an annotation or a highlight as their second of the 3 close reads. If I think my students might struggle a little bit with their interest or their schema surrounding a topic, I might chunk the text using that text reader function. So we're pausing and we're taking breaks between different pieces of the article to maybe make some real life connections or have some discussion, tie the article into points of interest that I think might capture my students, tie them in and get them a little bit more invested in the article. Yeah, I can definitely show you where that text reader function is.
And we'll make sure that we put it in the chat for you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
And we'll have time for questions and answers at the end, so we can definitely circle back to that.
Perfect. Right. So now that you've had a chance to do your second close read, although I apologize, I was like the bad teacher that was talking, giving directions while you're trying to read, right? What are some of the key vocab terms or claims that you think students would pull out of this reading? Yeah, I see Christine mentioning bourgeoisie. Like now that bougie has made it into the vernacular, I just really delight in teaching students the historical roots of that term. I see we got a mention of capitalism. Yeah, that's great. You know, in this revolutions unit, I feel like we often teach the development of new economic systems and the political revolutions as discrete topics when really they're intertwined, as Bennett eloquently points out in the article. Oh yeah, Lisa, I like that you pointed out material, one of those words that kids probably do have some schema about, but in a very different context than is used here. Lucrative, hierarchy, 7 Years' War, all great points. So the third read is probably my favorite, honestly, because it's what gets students thinking the most critically. And once you've laid the foundation with the first and second reads, I think you might be surprised that students can make some pretty insightful observations during this third read. Because it is more relying on your ability to make connections than reread the text in its entirety, this is probably a chance where students would go back and skim and just pull out the key points that they need to, you know, as historians do in reality. They don't reread a text cover to cover time and time again. We thought that it would be beneficial to put you in some breakout rooms so that you could discuss that third read. Again, this is where you're looking for information that supports, extends, and challenges your knowledge on the topic. So we'll see you back in about 7 minutes.
Hi, just FYI, I'm on my phone and my computer. That's why you're going to see my little picture there, but I am in a room.
No worries. Thank you.
Sorry, and I have a doctor's appointment at 4, so I'm going to have to probably log off, but thank you.
It's okay. I appreciate you being here.
I am with a similar problem. I am with a lot of people around here, so I have my headphones, but I cannot talk much.
That's all right. I'm thankful that you're here.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
All right. Looks like folks are coming back. Welcome back. All right. Would a couple of people be willing to either unmute or share in the chat some of the highlights of your conversation about the third close read?
I thought it was helpful to have other people tell me how long it took them to usually get it done so that I could kind of gauge how, if I was doing it kind of correctly, or if not correctly, at least if other people were encountering some of the same time problems I was.
The first time around, it always takes me longer than I expect. But I guess I've just come to see that as an investment. You know, the more time students practice, the more it becomes a habit, and they become more proficient as the year goes on. Anything else that you took away?
Our group connected sort of current political global unrest and sort of said, oh, wow, the world has changed so much, but also not in so many ways. And then we also connected it to, you know, how it references the Declaration of Independence and things like that, so we could draw on their prior knowledge. Hopefully they read it and studied it. But just maybe just draw on what they've already read, and then also connect to some of the things that are happening around the globe today and unrest.
Absolutely.
Really.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Helping students to see how economics and politics intertwine today, I think really sheds a new level of light and understanding on this topic. Thank you so much for sharing that, Anne.
Hey, Anne, I think there's another great question that popped in the chat from Anna Marie. She asked, we had some questions about how students should evaluate an author's claim/argument in what we view as an informational article like this.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. One thing I really value is how each article has a bio about the author, so you can see a little bit about their expertise. If you've done any of the claim testing exercises in the OER project too, I think those can be really powerful to arm students to know what to believe. If you haven't done any of those, basically students are trained in identifying different types of claims and evidence as using intuition, logic, reasoning, or authority to know, you know, essentially what to believe, because certainly not all claims are as credible as others. So I would really suggest using some of those claim testing activities. You can rely on that because, you know, I think that a lot of students do say, well, this was written by a historian, so it must be pretty good. But, you know, as they develop this skill throughout the year, I think you'll see that their critical thinking advances and they're able to employ those claim testers to say, well, you know, this use of evidence is really more persuasive in this paragraph than it is in their paragraph. Rob, do you have any tips on that? I know you're kind of a pro at this strategy.
Well, it's certainly something that I believe in. I think when it comes to this question, students default to just really logical thinking, like, this guy's a historian or this person's a historian. Why would you give me something that's not credible? I can look at the biography page on the back. Like, they obviously know what they're talking about, you know, but it's also lends itself to be an opportunity to push students back into the text and find maybe a piece of evidence that corroborates something that we've also talked in class. I always like making connections. I love how each unit or era in the various courses will start with overview readings. You know, so this one in particular, you know, is about, you know, causation economically as it relates to revolutions. But, you know, I challenge students, can we connect it back to something that we've already done, or can we connect it back to something that they've already heard? Can we start building those critical or historical thinking skills, you know, where we can start viewing the author as credible beyond his or her, you know, credentials at the end of the article.
That's a great point, kind of putting students into the role of historian so that they can corroborate just as we would expect a professional to do. Okay, thank you for that.
In my group, we were talking about the idea of the philosophers, right, as the ones who create these macro frames to justify revolutions, and then the role of the people, the real people. And one of the participants said that students don't see that connection, that she asked, what do you think that a regular person in the time was thinking about, what that person would have said? And it really resonated with me, because when we teach about revolutions, we teach about these great philosophers, these thinkers, right? And in fact, it was triggered by a very down-to-earth need, like food insecurity, as the same situation that happened with the Arab Spring, right? It was triggered by the same situation. So yes, we have these ideas, which are great, but also the implementation, the beginning of a revolution, of a change happens from, in many cases, bottom up, right? So that was something that resonated with me.
Absolutely. And how empowering for students to think about that, to realize the power that their voice has. Thank you so much, Laura.
And before we move forward, Sammy has hit the raise hand button. Been waiting patiently.
Oh, I apologize. Thank you. Sammy, how may I assist?
Yes, I just wanted to participate, but thought it'd be more appropriate just raise my hand, but it's okay.
Great. Yeah, thank
It's
you.
my first time here. Thank you so much for having me. One of the issues I took with the article that we discussed was the definition of capitalism being what I saw as anachronistically applied here, misused, because I see more of a mercantilism system. Even people at that time would have said this is not a free market. Like, I don't know any economist that would look at the quote unquote material conditions and say this was capitalism, this is a free market, when there was so much inequality and slavery and exploitation and imperialism at that time, just given that entire century. So that was just an issue I took with. I thought it'd be a good question to have the kids. Is this closer to capitalism as defined by free markets, property rights, rule of law, or is this closer to mercantilism, where people are just trying to extract wealth and transfer from one hand to another? So that's just something that came across my mind.
Oh yeah, and what a sophisticated conversation. I would be so impressed to hear my high school students debating that topic. Thank you for sharing. So at this time, we'd like to transition from kind of putting you in the role of student more so back into the role of teacher. We're going to be sharing some links to student exemplars, students who have completed the 3 Close Reads tool. We'll be heading back to breakout rooms to have you read through and analyze these student samples. In your rooms, we'd ask that you would please generate some suggestions for feedback, advice, coaching. What would you tell this student if they were in your classroom that they might do to improve, to elevate their 3 Close Read skill set? If you would also please choose a spokesperson to report out for when we reconvene. Thank you. I might also encourage you to think back to that checklist as you're developing your suggestions for feedback.
Also, those odd number rooms are going to do the first link, and even number rooms will do the second link.
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. Hey, welcome back, everyone. We didn't tell you in advance, but the 2 different versions were written by students who are performing the task with 2 different levels of proficiency. So at this time, we're going to ask for a few spokespeople to chime in and share some suggestions that they might offer for feedback or coaching if these examples were written by students in your classrooms. So let's start with the example that had the blue text, the first example. So this would have been for folks who are in odd number breakout rooms. Do we have any spokesperson that's willing to either unmute or share in the chat what they might suggest to this individual?
I'm happy to be a spokesperson for my group.
Thank you.
Sure. So we talked about when we sort of looked at it against the checklist, but we felt like the student, at least for the kind of throughout, we would say kind of met standards. Like if you wanted to use meets or exceeds. We kind of thought that the student really met standards, but certainly didn't exceed. And then when we got to the third read, and we didn't get all the way through the third read, but at least the first question about sort of credibility, the student in this example kind of talked about like the author used credible sources and made a logical argument and used credible sources. And so we probably would have, if that was our student, talked about how we would probably want to ask some sort of follow-up probing questions, like what were those credible sources and why, and what was kind of the logic that was laid out. So that in that portion, we were kind of questioning that just really felt like the bare minimum for a student to get by on that one. And so we thought we would need to ask some sort of probing questions there to get a little bit more.
Great, thank you.
But we also came to the same conclusion that the students had a good analysis, but began to fatigue toward the end, if you will, and didn't offer the detail quotes, examples to support their argument.
Thank you, Elaine. Anyone else? I found that third read is the one where you really get the deep insight into students' comprehension and analytical skills. So I'm glad that sounds like some of you came to that similar conclusion in your groups. How about example number 2, the one with the red text for folks who are in the even numbered groups?
I'd be willing to talk about that one. We talked about number 1 in the vocabulary section, having a definition of bourgeoisie that I don't totally understand what the heck it's saying. So, and given the students' other responses, it doesn't make any sense that they would understand it. So yeah. We said the biggest thing is make sure you understand your own definition.
Yes, your definition, not the one from the Googles.
Yeah. And so the other thing was that we said kind of go deeper in all of this. We thought the second read, like what they put in as evidence, we would have thought they should put in as key details, and then explain why you think that's key detail. How does that connect to what you think the article is about, or like what the main point is? Let me look at it. That, you know, that like that doesn't really look like evidence. That looks more like argument. So
yeah, and that's a nuanced point for kids to understand.
And then we said for like support, it confirmed why and how the different revolutions went down. It's like, okay, but why did they go down? What did it confirm for you? Like, be specific. And it's a lot of be specific. Don't just assume that we're going to get that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Larson.
For my group, it appeared that the student kind of skimmed all 3 parts and did a lot of restating, didn't want to write too much. So what we were thinking of, and we were thinking about how to approach this, is that this is a skill that's a work in progress, and it probably would have to be scaffolded a lot. I suggested that, for example, especially for the second and the third parts, that maybe they partner up with somebody or they go by table, and that we start that way, or maybe even with a little teacher instruction to kind of draw them out, because this is just, it's not something that they're used to and that they can't jump into. And they keep on trying to answer the fact questions. They don't want to do the analysis and the corroboration because they're really just not sure how to do it. So I think it opens up a whole other can of worms. And we're calling the parent too, by the way, right after this meeting.
Tony, I think I owe you a cup of coffee because you just gave us such a beautiful transition to the next portion here. So thank you for that.
Sure.
As Tony so beautifully stated, this is a skill that will be scaffolded throughout the year. So we would like to take some time for some collegial sharing about how you can make that work for students in a practical setting. Shortly, we'll be reopening those breakout rooms one final time for you to look at this 3 close reads protocol and decide when is the right time to use it with your students, for whom, how will you use it, will you make any modifications, what will you do for your particular population to ensure that they can be successful in this protocol. And then one last time, we'll ask for folks to share out. Welcome back, everyone. Do we have a couple of folks who would be willing to share some key takeaways from their conversation about interventions?
Let's see. Our group talked about how we would sometimes reword the stages for the students, and then we all seem to like the checklist and even using those questions as kind of a scaffold for rewording those specific questions. So the kids just think they're getting, sometimes when they see a graphic organizer type thing and they see how much space they have to fill, they get intimidated.
You're right. I think the checklist really consolidates that.
Mm-hmm. And then I've been to some of the forums that we have on here, and I've really appreciated people share their adaptions of the protocol, and I've appreciated looking at those.
I've gotten some great ideas from there too. I have a Google Drive folder where I save all of those brilliant little takeaways. Thank you. Anyone else?
One of the things that one of our people in our group brought up that I think I'm going to try adapting was they were talking about, well, how we need to build up, in their case, for state testing, but also just build up their stamina with these things. And I'm wondering if part of my issues has been that I've jumped in the whole hog rather than going, all right, we're going to take this part of the article and just do this protocol on this, so that they have less to think about, and then perhaps then build up that way.
Yeah, that's a great point. I actually just introduced 3 close reads to my students last week, and we did it with one of the graphic bios. You know, it's one page, so it's a pretty short text, but it got students familiar with the procedure of 3 close reads, so that then we, do it with text next time around. They feel pretty comfortable with that protocol. Anyone else?
I just have a basic comprehension one that I tried today. Sorry, that's my doorbell. They were reading Declaration of Independence, and there's a long list of complaints Jefferson has against George III. And it's written in quite elevated diction and, not really accessible to some of my kids. So I gave them one each, and they had to put it into Miami English, which came out quite funny, but they then were able to comprehend, the basic meaning. Now, later we can analyze language, because I'm an English teacher, we'll analyze language. But first, to get that comprehension, they took what Jefferson said and they put it in their words. And there's 17 things that he was specific things he was, saying the British were doing wrong. And they just sort of translated it, really. So it's quite basic, but once we've got that, it's very time consuming. Then we can then in my class we would analyze the language. I know that that's not everybody's class,
Yes, I tell my students, all right, let's translate this from English to English.
Yeah.
And they're relieved, like they're thankful to have that opportunity.
Yeah. And Miami English is, it's very fun for them.
I love your phrasing of that.
It's a different English.
Okay. So on that note of making some modifications here, some suggestions to make this strategy work in your classroom, including providing some rationale, maybe giving a little bit of pedagogical background to close reading and how students might use this in multiple avenues in life. Again, emphasizing that it's a skill and we have to practice skills, whether it's shooting a free throw, playing the cello, playing a video game, we have to practice those skills to get better. But also really encouraging modeling, especially at the start of this process. I like to sometimes put a piece of text up on my board and do a think aloud. Anne was just sharing her strategy with the Declaration of Independence. I imagined that she could project one of those statements, one of Jefferson's grievances, onto the board and do a think aloud about how to, translate that from English to Miami English. The more that we can make our thinking visible for students, I think the more that we can take away, sort of the stigma that they sometimes feel, inappropriately so, that comes with feeling challenged by a text. We want to make sure that it's really apparent that it's okay to feel challenged because we're going to arm them with strategies to be successful. It's also good to encourage students to read around the text. Don't just go cover to cover, because that's not what historians do. They will, use the index, use the table of contents. They'll use targeted sections to find the necessary information. So I think the 3 close reads strategy helps students read flexibly. In addition, we recommend changing it up. As I said, my first encounter with 3 close reads this year was done with a graphic biography. You can also apply the strategy to data, to videos, to all sorts of different kinds of texts. So on that note, I just want to mention that there will be a follow-up session in this Skills Clinic series coming this spring on how to apply the 3 close read strategy to different forms of text, if you want to keep an eye out for that. And finally, offering that right amount of support. Those were some great strategies on how to help students. Something else that I sometimes draw on are the questions that are inside the lesson page of the OER Project website, especially for those support, challenge, extend questions. One of my shortcomings is coming up with really great, insightful questions, but I want my students to make those connections and have those conversations. So if you click in to the lesson page from the unit page, the lesson page, you're going to see some custom support, challenge, extend questions for each of the readings. That can be really wonderful to mix it up on that 3rd read. So we want to send you off knowing that you can continue to get support. We had a reference earlier to the forums that are available on the OER Project community page. This has been a huge source of ongoing professional development for me. I'm always so thankful of folks who are sharing their modifications for 3 close reads here, offering suggestions and support. If you have any questions about reading or anything else, please do feel free to post in the community. Or if you try something from this evening, maybe you modify it to meet your student population, please share. We would love to know how it goes. There will be a specific after party thread in the community. If you have anything that's specific to this evening session, we'd love to hear from you. Rob, would you mind just chiming in quickly on your experiences in the community and the way that it supports your teaching?
Absolutely. Sorry, you caught me dropping links for the things that you're talking about. But I mean, the community is really one of the, it's a professional learning community. You've got amazing educators that are being vulnerable and sharing struggles and sharing successes and just collaborating. And I teach in a small high school. There's 5 social studies teachers, grades 9 through 12, and we can share a lot of great ideas, but connecting with other teachers around the country and really expanding those networks has been really advantageous. One example, there was a teacher, just last week that posted about how she's modifying 3 close reads and to really force her students through the process. She was creating multiple versions of the text and just creating a reading text that just had titles, headings, and images so that they couldn't look at the text, and how it forced them to look at it from a different lens. And then the second example, or the second version of the reading, all those other things were stripped out, and it was just the informational side of things. I think that's something I never would have thought of, and it just serves as one example of when you're collaborating and talking with teachers, you get so many amazing perspectives.
Thank you. If you're interested in more professional development, I suggest that you keep an eye on the professional development tab at the top of the OER Project community website. There are self-paced PD modules. There are going to be more skills clinics throughout the school year. And then every summer, there is an OC for social studies conference. A couple days, they get some really fantastic keynote speakers, as well as track talks that are targeted towards specific topics, specific skills. So that page is a great one to check back on occasion to see what new PD offerings might be popping up. So before we close up today, I just wanted to give the opportunity for anyone to ask questions, and note that we have a link to a short survey. We always love feedback and opportunities for growth. So please do feel free to share your thoughts there. And with that, we'll field any questions that you have.
Can you put the link in the chat? Oh, there it is. I was going to say, you can put the link in the chat. There's the link in the chat. And is that where we'll get the PD information for our school to do our professional development hours?
Megan, is it correct that they can put in a request to get a certificate for the PD?
Yes.
Thank you.
Team, okay, got it.
Lisa, if you reach out to team@oerproject.com, they can get the certificate arranged for you. Thank you.
With that text reader, I was really appreciate you guys showing us that. So you're just using words read out loud. Is that what you're doing?
If I'm going to adapt the text to where my students might do like an annotation, or sometimes I'll even chunk together pieces of different articles if I just don't have, the time to do as many as I wish I could. That's just a really nice way that you can copy and paste into another format. And I still give credit to the, I'll link to the original article so students know where the information is coming from. But if I want them to, do like an annotation, if they're highlighting different things or really doing a little summary off to the side, that's just a nice way that you can save yourself a lot of formatting headaches.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Or like Rob mentioned, if you wanted for the second read to have your students just look at the text because you already had them preview the visuals separately, then that might be a nice way you could do that without the copy and paste nightmare.
Okay.
And,
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying thank you. Go ahead.
I wanted to field another question. Came from Anna Marie, who said, I don't use the entire curriculum, but I found amazing content to help me out in my world history class. I'm afraid of using close reads as a strategy over and over and over again because I don't think my kids will buy in again and again. I think it takes a balance. Like there's so many incredible readings that are a part of the World History Project curriculums. I personally, speaking only for myself, don't think you can use all of them. So I'm picking and choosing. I personally love the overview readings as a way to build continuity through the way that I'm facilitating learning in my classroom and starting each of my eras with those. And then just kind of picking out really strong articles that I feel that are enhancing, the experience that I want to create for the classroom. And then you can also change it up. People, tonight have made reference to group work. I might model a reading and do it with them. I think that alleviates some of the burden, allowing them to break out in groups. Sometimes I difference of opinions, and sometimes I feel read 1 and 2 are more important than 3. But also may use 3 as a way to jump back into the reading in a following class, that we went through read 1 and 2 together in whatever way. And then just as a recap the following day, say, hey, we're going to break out into 4 groups and have groups answer one of those 4 questions that are part of read 3, and kind of just going through it differently. Anne had mentioned just different strategies. I love 3 close reads for video. If you're familiar with the website, there's crash course videos that are fun and exciting, but they move quick. That's a 3 close read strategy, pulling factual information and meaning from those types of videos, if that's how you're using them. So I think a little bit of variety and balance in your approach, and you don't have a turnkey methodology that you have to follow, can give you some of the flexibility. And overall, I found that what's 2 to 3 days of getting through a reading in the beginning of the year quickly becomes 2 and then down to 1. And it's a formulaic approach that, I think kids can buy into and will buy into, overall.
I would second everything Rob just said. He's the guru of reading in my classroom, because I do all of the picking and choosing, but sometimes we annotate a text, which I borrowed from Rob. Sometimes we do a 3-2-1, which I borrowed from Rob. So apparently, Rob, you are the guru in my reading in my classroom. But yeah, it's a lot of picking and choosing the articles. We read a lot, but we don't do a full 3CR every time we read. So my students definitely, and I teach middle school, they buy in. They know that when I'm asking them to do a 3 close read, that it's an important article that I need them to understand the content, and they participate willingly.
And I use the phrase academic stamina. In September, my kids do not have the academic stamina, like running a race, to go out and run miles. It's a slow process. I'm teaching some of them how to crawl, some of them are walking, some of them are jogging, some want to sit on the bench, they don't want to do this. Whatever analogy you want to use, but really, I know where I want them. It may be an individualized goal, based on their specific needs or where they're at, but I know kind of where I want them, by the end of the year, and it's a process, over the course of 40 weeks for us.
That is a great point. And my history love and heart would love to continue this conversation, but I know that it is time to wrap it up. So I want to redirect you to that conversation in the community, the after party. If you have any other thoughts, questions, resources, please do direct it there. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Once again, I want to thank you so much for carving out time of your busy day to join us this evening, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.